Hello everyone, thank you for joining this webinar, Your Guide to Success, preparing for Microsoft Azure Developer Certification. My name is Peter, Azure Trainer at Infosectrain. I'm going to talk about some of the exciting information about Azure Developer Certification. Let's get started. Let's take a few minutes just to talk about our company Infosectrain. Infosectrain established in 2016 and we are one of the security and technology training company. And our trainer pool contains well-talented and experienced trainers to give you the best learning experience for you. We have been in the industry for past 4+ years and we have trained 15,000 plus professionals across the globe. And these are our trusted clients. And what's unique about Infosectrain is that you get a flexible learning opportunity and you have an access to amazing contents, and all our trainings are delivered by the certified and experienced professionals. Let's get into the topic now. The way I structured this presentation into several pieces. First, let's talk about AZ-204 skills outline. This will give you an idea about what you are going to learn through this program. Next, we will talk about who should pursue this exam and what are the prerequisites to make your learning easier. Then we will see what are the possible market opportunities if you become an Azure developer. Later, we have some topic for you today as a demonstration. So just to give you an idea about our learning delivery, where we are going to talk about Azure App Service and some of its great features, how we can deploy the app service, how we can diagnose the app service using the application insights. So these are some of the topics that we are going to today as part of this demonstration. And finally, I can take up any questions if you have. Let's get started. In this AZ-204 exam, your skills will be primarily measured into 5 areas that are develop Azure Compute Solution, develop for Azure Storage, implementing Azure Security, and monitoring your applications, and finally, consuming the third-party services. Now let's demystify further to give you the best understanding. Now this slide, I have put the information in more visual way so that you can easily understand what is inside the AZ-204. The first topic is to understand about the developing Azure Compute Solution, where you can expect 25 to 30% of the questions coming from this space. Now what's compute service? Compute service basically provides the compute infrastructure, which means you can consume CPU memory. And there are many Azure services like Azure Virtual Machine, Web App, Functions. These all provides the compute infrastructure. So you get an understanding of when to use what, and basically you can deploy your applications inside the compute infrastructure. Then second topic, it's about developing solutions using the Azure Storage services, where you can expect 15 to 20% questions coming from this space. Now what's storage service? A storage service basically helps you to store the data inside the cloud. It can be unstructured data, it can be a structured data. So Azure have different storage options such as storage account, SQL database, NoSQL database. Now you get an understanding of how you can leverage these various Azure services when it comes to any storage requirement for your applications. Now when it comes to third topic, which is implementing Azure Security, where you can expect 20 to 25% of the questions coming from this space. Now in this space, you will learn about various Azure security technologies such as Key Vault, Managed Identity, Azure Active Directory security features. So basically you get an understanding on various security tools. Then you know how you can leverage these tools to incorporate the authentication and authorizations layers inside your applications, and also how you can using these services. Then the fourth topic, it's about implementing monitoring solution, where you can expect 15 to 20% of the questions coming from this space. Here you will learn about various monitoring features such as Azure Monitor, Application Insights, Log Analytics, So you get an understanding of how you can use these technologies to build a monitoring solution for your applications. So you can build applications, then you will come to know how you can send the telemetry data from your applications to the monitoring services like application insights. Then we will see how we can leverage those data to monitor your applications. Finally, it's about consume third-party service or integration services where you can expect 15 to 20% of the question. Now, there are many integration services inside the Azure, such as Event Hub, Event Grid, Service Bus, API management services. Now, basically, integration services helps you to integrate your solution with another services. For example, let's imagine I'm having some application API and you wanted to consume my application API. So to make such collaboration happens, you may leverage the services like API management. Now, throughout this course, AZ-204, we will be talking about various features such as starting from VM, web app, function, containers, Kubernetes, monitoring solutions, security solutions. So this is what inside the AZ-204, and I hope now you know what's inside AZ-204 exam. Now let's talk about some of the benefits. If you become an Azure developer, what are the benefits that exist and who should pursue this AZ-204 exam? So first let's talk about who should pursue this exam and what are the prerequisites. Now this course is primarily designed for developers, programmers, or any person who can code. However, we strongly recommend this course even as a system administrator can take this exam. If you actually look at the industry transformation, we are actually customers. As a customers, we are consolidating from infrastructure to the platform as a service model. Let's say in the infrastructure model where your applications are deployed inside the virtual machines, and this trend is getting changed. Going forward, your app will be deployed inside the web applications or serverless function or container or Kubernetes. So those are some of the platforms will be used to host the applications. So moving forward, even if you are a system administrator, you should have an understanding on how applications will be deployed inside the Azure and how you can manage your applications in a day-to-day manner. So we strongly suggest if you are a developer, definitely you should go for this exam, or even if you are a architect, cloud solution architect, you should have an understanding of this exam because moving forward, it's more of cloud native architecture. The traditional infrastructure, the traditional deployment model is no longer valid. So moving forward in 1 year or 2 years down the lane, it will be altogether new ecosystem. And what are the prerequisites? As a developer or as a cloud solution architect or as a system admin, if I want to pursue AZ-204, what are the prerequisites? Now, basically, you have to have a basic understanding of cloud computing. When I say basic understanding, you should know what is cloud computing, the on-demand infrastructure. You need to know what is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, the private cloud, hybrid cloud. So you should have an understanding and basics of cloud computing. Then you should have an understanding on the programming languages. At least you should have a scripting skills or the coding skills. It's good to have if you are a .NET developer or Java developer because these services, it's provided by Azure. And on top of this, you bring your code and you deploy your code inside this solution. And this course, it's not about learning programming skills. It's all about how your program can be deployed into these services and how you can secure your program, how you can monitor your program, how you can enhance the operations inside your program. That's all about this particular course. And also, it is expected you should have some understanding of the Git command lines because if you like to push some applications inside the Azure, probably you will definitely use some Git command lines. As an IDE, it's good to have VS Code. Visual Studio Code, because if you use Visual Studio Code, you have a lot of integration capabilities. In fact, it can be directly plugged into DevOps. There are so many extensions available for VS Code that can simplify your deployment experience. Then definitely it's a good idea to use the PowerShell or Azure CLI, because any Azure services, if you want to deploy, it makes more sense if you use the PowerShell or CLI to deploy it so that you can save a good amount of time. Then you should have some knowledge about Azure SDK. Azure SDK, it's a software development kit that's provided by Microsoft. Now, there are a lot of binaries or the libraries which are released by Microsoft for Azure services. So let's say if you like to deploy some serverless function, yes, there are some libraries which are released by Microsoft, and you will consume those libraries and to incorporate into your applications so that you can deploy it from your machine to the Azure. So those are some of the prerequisites or the good to have skills if you like to pursue with AZ-204 exams. Now let's talk about the possible opportunities. If you are an expert in this space, what are the possible opportunities and how is the market trend? And as you probably know, software is everywhere today, and every company is acting as a software company. Even if you are from the different industry like a manufacturing to retail or financial services to consumer services, every company, they are paying a lot of attention to modernize their existing application ecosystem. And you also definitely know about the digital transformation trend, the innovation trend that's happening on the industry. So every companies are started innovating the way they are doing the business today. So they are refactoring their applications, they are re-architecting their applications. And when they do the re-architect or refactor, they started using the services. And it is a market research says that by 2022, the global platform as a service is expected to grow by $52 billion. So it is very, very clear that there is a huge amount of opportunities is going to be exist because of the rising adoptions on the platform as a services model. And this, we are very sure that, and this is going to create millions of opportunities. So as long as you have the AZ-204 skill sets, that's going to definitely contribute to support your career, to enhance your career. Okay, now let's talk about Azure App Service. Now, Azure App Service is one of the component of the AZ-204. If you look at this picture, so we are actually going to talk about web application. And this web application is not only a one component, but also there are so many components actually involved if you actually look at the AZ-204 skill set. But today we are going to talk about web applications, and also we are going to talk about a little bit about the applications insights. Now, let's talk about App Service. What is App Service? So App Service, basically, it's the scalable hosting service for your application. So traditionally, if you want to deploy your website inside your machine, you have to have a Windows server or you have to have a Linux server. On top of this, you install your IIS or Apache configurations. Then you push your web configurations. That's the traditional model that we have been following. In fact, many customers as of today, still they are using the traditional web hosting model. Now, that is the best example for infrastructure as a service, because basically you have to manage the machine as well as you have to manage your application. Now, this is actually becoming a bottleneck for many companies in terms of cost, because you as a business, your business requires this application to be running, but then you end up managing the virtual machine, right? Now, this is why the cloud service is offering another service called web application, Azure Web App. So web app basically falls under platform as a service criteria. When it comes to platform as a service, you don't have to manage the operating system. So the benefit of not managing the operating system is that you don't have to pay attention on the software updates, patching. You don't have to pay update on the monitoring. You don't have to pay attention on the, let's say, some critical issues, server crash, because that's responsibility is actually offloaded to the the cloud service provider like Microsoft. Now, as a customer, if you want to build your website, you can just take this web app from the Azure portal, and then you can start pushing your code. Your web app will be immediately up and running. So you can easily build, deploy, and test your applications in a very quickly. And this platform, let's say, this supports multiple programming languages. So you can bring your deployment stack. Let's say if your application is running on .NET or Java or Python, Node.js, Ruby, it supports wide range of programming languages. And also when it comes to integrating this with the DevOps, it's much well integrated. So these are some of the benefits you actually gain by using the Azure web app. And today we are going to deploy this web app and see how we can deploy, how we can publish our code to the Azure web app, and see what are the benefits that's inside the Azure App Services. Now, when you talk about Azure App Services, you should know about Azure App Service plans. So there is a pricing associated with the Azure web app. The pricing model is basically comes from the App Service plan, which is ASP. You can have a single ASP which can be connected to multiple app services. Now the ASP is basically, it's a combination of CPU memory, and there are multiple ASP options available. Let's say there will be a S1 plan, S2 plan, P1 plan, P2 plan. There are multiple options. Let's say if you select S1, you get a 2 GB RAM, and if you select P1, you might get a 4 GB RAM or 8 GB RAM. Now, in virtual machine model, in the virtual machine model, you have to pay for this VM. The VM, typically there are multiple VMs queues available. Similarly, for the web app, you have to have a single app service plan, and the same app service plan can be connected to multiple web apps. So you don't have to pay multiple times, but you have to carefully choose the resource model. Now I'm going to show you some short demo. We will deploy this web applications, and I have some small piece of code which is sitting in my local machine, and I'm going to push this HTML code into the web applications which we are going to build now. So let's get into an action now. So to deploy the web applications, you should have an Azure subscription. In this case, I am going to use my existing Azure subscription. So I have created a resource group here, which is AZ-204, but inside the resource group, there is no resources exist. So let's go back to the PowerShell, and the first thing that you have to do, you can make a connection to the Azure. So I'm going to make a connection. So I'm validating my username and password. Now I have successfully established a connection. Okay. So now to create a web application, the first thing you should have is you should have an app service plan. In fact, you can create an app service web app directly from the Azure portal. But then I just wanted to use the Azure CLI because that's the best way of using the, it actually saves a lot of time. So this command is going to create an app service plan. So all it does is here, this is the SKU where I am mentioning S1. So S1 basically, it supports up to 2 GB RAM. But if you need the reference, you can definitely refer it in the Microsoft portal. That will have multiple options, or you can also check it out from the Azure portal. Now, let's create an app service plan. I'll name it as a ASP June 4 app. And then I'm going to create a web application. So shortly you will see the new app service plan will be created here. So let me just refresh. Yeah, I see here the app service plan is just created. Now shortly you will see the service will be reflecting here. Sometimes it takes a while, but then it should be reflecting here. Now we have to, I see here the app service plan is reflecting here. Now this is just an app service plan. Basically we are defining what is the compute capacity that is required for my application. But in case if you want to change the capacity, you can always come back here and you can scale up, you can scale down. You do have a flexibility. Let's say if you want to scale up, which means you are increasing from let's say this is the one which we selected, which is 1.75 GB. If you want to increase this to 16 GB or 32 GB, you can just come back here and you can change it. You can also change it through the command line. All right. So now let's go back again. Let's go ahead and create a web application. Now this is a command that I'm going to use to create a web application. Here I'm just specifying as AZ web app create, and this is my resource group name where I want to deploy this resource. And this is the app service name that we just created. So this is the name of the app service. So I'll just update this app service here. And the name of the web applications will be June 4 app. So let's go ahead and trigger this service. It's going to take a minute, and then immediately your app service is ready. Now, since I said this is the platform as a service, which means behind the scene there is a virtual machine, but you don't have to manage it. As a customer, we don't have to manage the virtual machine. So we just have to taking care of your application code. So as a business, we can just focus on the application code. We really don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. So as I said earlier, this is a local copy of my website. Let's imagine I have a small, simple HTML page which contains some informations. Imagine this is your web application. Now, as I said earlier, this is not only for the HTML static website, but also you can bring your ASP.NET, .NET Core applications, Java applications, Python, Node.js. It supports multiple programming languages. Now, let's go back and have a look if this is completed. Let's go back to the resource group. Yeah, as I can see here, the app service is currently created. Now, let's explore what's inside this app service. Now, as you can see here, there is a browse option. When I browse this, basically, this just give you the standard template. This actually, there is a hosting start HTML page, which is directly comes from the app service. And it's basically saying, yeah, this is your website. Now, we are going to replace this content with what we have in my local PC. Now, I said this is the platform as a service, which means behind the scene, there is a virtual machine. If you go to the console here, you can see there is a virtual machine, and this is the www root directory of that particular virtual machine. And if you say host name, you will see some name. Yeah, you will see some name. Now, technically speaking, as a customer, we don't have to manage this machine, and this machine is managed by cloud service provider like a Microsoft. Now, in this case, if you want to look at the existing configuration here, all you can see here is there is a hosting start HTML. And basically, in this space, we are going to push our content to here. Now, how do we push this content? My content is in my local machine, and how I am going to update this content into the Azure App Service platform. Now, let's go back to the presentation. This is where the app service is actually providing a wide range of features. Let's say, if you ask me what's the benefit of app services, basically app service supports dozens of features. Deployment center, multiple DB connections, native high availability, Azure AD, authorizations, monitoring, deployment starts. It's huge. Now, there is a feature here, deployment center. The deployment center, basically that feature supports us how we can publish our code. We can explicitly say how we want to manage the code going forward. So in this case, I have a local file, and let's go back to the Azure portal and see what are the options we have. Now, this is the deployment center, and if you go to the deployment center, you can see multiple options. Now, when it comes to any corporate scenario or when it comes to any enterprise scenario, you have to have a right process to manage your source code. Typically, you will have a DevOps process, or you will have any proper version control system. Now, Azure App Service does support various options. You can integrate this with the GitHub. You can integrate this with the Bitbucket. You can integrate this with the Azure repo, which is nothing but Azure DevOps. You can also connect with the external Git portals. Now, I am going to select local Git because my source code sits in my local machine, because this is a very simple application. But in case if this is the business productive application, definitely it may not be a local Git. It might be sitting in the GitHub or Bitbucket or any other version control system that my company identified. Now, for the demonstration purpose, let's select the local Git. So this is what deployment center. So Azure App Service does support multiple deployment options. Now let's save this, and yeah, as I can see here, this is the git clone URL, which means we can use this URL to publish anything inside the service platform. As we have discussed earlier, you should familiar with the git command line. That's one of the advantage. So now I'm going to copy this command line, and let's go back to the Azure command line. Okay, now these are some of the bunch of command lines which I can use to push my content, this content, to the Azure App Service platform. Now my files are located inside this path. So I am actually going back to the path, and let's say dir. Yeah. Now let's publish this content. Now I'm going to show you how I can publish my local content to the Azure App Service platform. Now, as you can see here in the console, we have seen there is no files exist here. And when I browse this, this is coming the standard template. Now let's go ahead and publish this. So first I'm initializing the directory. Then I'm adding the content, then I'm performing the, let's say, Azure app, web app. Okay, now let's commit and let's push this. Okay, so this is going to basically ask me the deployment credentials. The deployment credentials, you can take it from the Azure Web App Service. Now this is my deployment credential, and this is my password. Okay, as you can see here, we just performed the git push operation. The result of this git push operation, you can see the content is updated here. Let's go back to the console. Let's go back to the console here, and let's try to explore what is inside. As I can see here, I could see the files here. Now, if I refresh this page, you will see my website is running from here. Now, I'm sure you have some idea about how you can publish your content into the Azure Web App Service platform. By the way, Azure App Service platform does support multiple programming languages. As you can see here, let's say Quick Start. It supports ASP.NET, Java, Node.js, Python, PHP. So technically speaking, you can bring your own applications, and App Service platform can act as a platform where you can deploy your applications. Now let's talk about some of the benefits. Now, deployment center, I just showed you, it supports multiple deployment options. You can push this into the App Service platform. And now you can connect with multiple database connections. Let's say sometimes you might require a database connection. Let's say if I'm storing some information from my website and into the database, yes, it does provide the basic MySQL. That's part of the Azure App Service. But in case if you like to connect with the SQL database, or if you like to connect with the MongoDB, you can do that. In fact, you can add some app connection string. You can add the app connection strings. Let's say if I want to integrate this app service with the SQL database or Mongo database, I can say, let's say SQL, let's say connection string, and I can add the connection strings so that this web app can establish a connection to this pattern SQL database. So these are some of the capabilities that it has. Now, built-in high availability, which means you don't have to really worry about making your applications highly available, because behind the scene, if you actually look at this picture, you see here the app service basically running on the service fabric, and behind the scene there are multiple machines, and this infrastructure is completely managed by Microsoft, and you don't have to really worry about managing the high availability. Let's say you take the app service, you get a committed uptime. Microsoft may say that, okay, if you are taking app service, you will get 99.95% uptime guaranteed SLA. So you will get it. So you don't have to really worry about building the high availability mechanism. But then if you are leveraging the traditional on-premise based deployment, then you have to think about the high availability. So those are some of the benefits that's eventually going to add a lot of cost benefit for the end customers. Now it has a built-in monitoring. In fact, I am going to demonstrate the next thing, which is monitoring. Now monitoring, we have here, if you look at the Azure App Service, there is a native monitoring capabilities, which is application insight. Now you can simply activate the application insights, and that's going to give you the real-time metrics about your web applications. In fact, you can, if you like to debug your application, if you like to diagnose your applications, this particular service is going to give you a lot of informations about the, you can basically gain insights from your application. So let's enable this application in insights. This is enabled. Now the other benefits is Azure AD authorization, which means behind the scene, Azure, it's using the Azure Active Directory as the authentication provider and authorization provider. Now, if you like to leverage any kind of authentication requirements, you can definitely leverage the Azure AD. So Azure AD does provide various options, in order to support the modern authentication requirements, such as, OpenID Connect or OAuth. You can use the Azure AD to build the necessary authentication support. And deployment slot, these are some of the features that can simplify your testing experience. Let's say you are making a new release to your application. In fact, technically speaking, traditionally we used to have multiple stages. Let's say first you deploy it on the testing, then development, testing, production. So the whole release cycle is actually too long. And the deployment slots, it's basically, it's nothing but another instance that you can create within the app service itself. Now, as you can see here, I see there is one production slot and 100% of traffic is coming to the production slot. Now, let's say tomorrow I am making some new release. So I can simply add another slot. I can make that as a staging slot where I can deploy my code and I can partially route some traffic and test the functionality. So these are some of the great benefits that you can gain from the Azure App Service platform. Now, it have a container support. Now, we actually followed the code-based deployment model. But in case if you like to have a container-based deployment model, yes, you can use Azure App Service if you have any existing container. Now, native backup, it has a built-in backup. You don't really have to have any third-party backup solution. You can, within the app service itself, you can take a backup. It does provide various tools to diagnose any issues, and hybrid support, which means if you have any dependencies with the on-premise database, in fact, you can establish a link between Azure App Service and the backend database, which sits in the on-premise. And cross-origin resource sharing, and it has a built-in log streaming support, so that if you like to diagnose any issues, you can activate such things. All the logs can be streamed from the App Service platform. So these are some of the features about Azure App Services. When you actually take our course AZ-204, definitely we will deep dive into each and every area, and we can gain a lot of insights, informations through this course. Now, I hope that give you some idea about app service infrastructure. Now let's talk about how you can diagnose your applications using the application insights. Now, to diagnose your application, Azure does provide various diagnosing tools such as Azure Monitor. So how this works is basically you can collect metrics and logs from your app services. For example, let's say this is my app service platform, and here if you go to the diagnostic settings, there is a place where you can select the metrics and logs. So these are the various logs and metrics associated with the Azure App Service. Now you do have an option. Let's say if you are planning to maintain a centralized monitoring solution, what you can do, you can take these logs and you can send it to the log analytics workspace. And this workspace is nothing but a centralized log management workspace where you can keep all the logs. And apart from that, if you like to know more insight from the application, let's say if you like to know about the service connections, the exception that happens within the application, or if you like to do any usage tracking, then you can use the service like a application insights. The whole purpose of application insight is to you can gain visibility from your applications and you can get insights. You go inside and look at the page view, look at the exception, and this tool will give you the much simplified interface where you can easily spot out any issues. And I have a small demonstration using the application insights. So let's take a look. Now let's say we have activated the application insights for our application. Now this is my app service platform and I have activated the application insights. Now if you actually go to the resource group, you can see the app insights resource. Now this is my app insights resource. Now when I look at the app insights resource, I can get all the metrics that I could see here. Let's say if I'm making few service connection to my web application, I could see some spike here. I'm sure this will list out. This is near to real time. Hardly you might see 1 or 2 seconds delay. Now this have a lot of features. Let's say there is a live metric stream, there is a failure ratio, there is a performance analysis. So this will give you a lot of insights. Now let's say if I activate the live metric stream where I can see how many users are making a connection to my application and how my application is actually responding, what is the latency. So we can actually get this from this one console. So let's take an example. This is my application and I'm going to send some traffic now. I have a small file. I have a small tool. That's basically what it does. It's going to now generate some 10,000 concurrent connection to this application. Now shortly you will see this app service platform is receiving n number of requests. As you can see here, there are so many requests coming in. The average latency is, let's say, 500 milliseconds and it can go up to 1 second. So that could be a performance issue. If you look at the CPU utilization, this is hitting the 100 because I have produced huge amount of traffic from outside. Now, the live metric stream, basically, you can monitor your applications in a real time where you can get a lot of insights about your applications, what's going on and how you can fix the issues. Now, but also you have a lot of other features like a smart detection. The smart detection, basically, if your applications have any issues, any exception that's happening behind the scene, this can detect proactively those kind of issues. Now, if you look at the application mapping, here you can see, I think we don't have any much data, but shortly you will see some data. Let's say it receives 1 instance, 4 calls it's received, 500 milliseconds is the average latency. I think this is still the past data, but if you actually come back after some time, you will see the latency was more than 500 milliseconds. You get all insights. But also, let's say you have this is a front end. And if your front end have connections to the back end, if there is any service call latency between the front end and back end, you get all insights from this application mapping. And also, if you want to know if any failure inside the applications, you can actually look at the failure tab where you can deep dive into any issues. In this case, I have 8,000 connections it's actually hit, but actually none of the connections have failed. So it's actually give lot of insights, and you can also see the top 3 failures, top 3 exceptions. If you go to the performance, you can see how your application performance is. As you can see here, the request count is actually going above certain limit, so definitely there is a performance issue. And you can also see from where this is the requests are coming. So you get all insights about your applications. Now, and also there are a lot of amazing automations that you can do using the Azure Monitor solution. The idea of monitoring your applications in the cloud is that we can collect the metrics and logs. Metrics, it means it talks about some aspect of system, let's say HTTP latency or the CPU utilization. That's all about the metrics. Now logs, it's basically who have accessed, think about application log, think about performance logs. Now you basically take these logs and metrics from various resources, your application, your Azure resources, and you centrally store it in a log analytics workspace. And on top of that, you can actually create some alerts. You can configure the monitoring baseline, and based on that, the Azure Monitor can automatically generate an alert, and those alerts can be integrated into your ticketing solution. Let's say if you are using ServiceNow, you can integrate those alerts into the Logic, with the help of Logic App. Logic App is basically, it's a process automation service. With the help of Logic App, you can integrate this with your ticketing system. So the whole thing can be fully automated. And in fact, we are going to learn a lot, as part of this program. Okay. Now, that's the demonstration for today. And let's do a quick recap on what we have discussed. So we talked about AZ-204 skills outline, where we talk about how we can leverage the compute solutions, storage solutions, identity solutions, network solutions. And then we also talked about some of the AZ-204 market opportunities and how the technology is moving and what kind of opportunities is there in the market. Then we talked about Azure App Service, which is one of the smallest component, small piece of information from the AZ-204 track, but then we can also explore a lot through this upcoming trainings. And finally, we talked about the diagnosing your applications using the application insights. That being said, that's the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your time.